Hello and welcome. Before we begin, I want you to take a moment and imagine a life where change doesn't feel like a battle, where the things you've always wanted to do, the routines you've always hoped to build, feel as natural as breathing. That's the promise at the heart of Tiny Habits by Fogg, that transformation doesn't have to be overwhelming, and that the smallest, simplest actions can rewrite the story of your life. If you find this summary helpful, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to BookSnap, and comment below the title of the book you'd like us to summarize next. We'll make it happen soon. Now, picture this. It's a quiet morning, sunlight pooling on your kitchen table. You stir a cup of coffee, still half asleep, and your mind drifts to the changes you've been meaning to make. Exercising more, eating better, finally writing that book, calling your parents more often. But like so many mornings before, the thought feels heavy. You've tried before, you've promised yourself before. And yet, here you are again. What if I told you that the problem isn't you? That the reason your resolutions crumble isn't because you're lazy, undisciplined, or lacking willpower, but because you've been taught the wrong way to change. Fogg begins with this truth. Change doesn't start with grand declarations or radical overhauls. It begins with something so small, so almost laughably easy, that you can't help but succeed. It begins with a spark. He calls this the beauty of starting tiny. Imagine trying to push a massive boulder uphill, exhausting, frustrating, and often hopeless. But what if instead you started with a single pebble? You could move it effortlessly. And, over time, as your strength and confidence grow, that pebble becomes a stone, the stone becomes a rock, and eventually you find yourself moving mountains. In these first moments of his method, the focus isn't on achieving, it's on starting. He encourages you to pick something so small you can do it even on your worst day. Want to floss your teeth? Start with one tooth. Want to get in shape? Start with 2 push-ups. Want to meditate? Start with a single deep breath. This isn't about lowering your standards. It's about creating a pattern your brain can latch onto. Because when you succeed at something small, even ridiculously small, you create a sense of victory. And victory, no matter how tiny, feels good. And here's the secret most people miss. Your brain doesn't measure the size of the win. It only registers the emotion of it. That small sense of, I did it, becomes a seed. You plant it in your mind, and it begins to take root. But Fogg also understands the human tendency to dismiss small beginnings. We live in a culture obsessed with go big or go home. We admire dramatic transformations and heroic acts of self-discipline. Yet, the people who make real, lasting change, they don't sprint out of the gate. They begin slowly, steadily, intentionally. They give themselves permission to grow at a human pace. In his own life, Fogg tested this idea again and again. When he wanted to start doing push-ups, he didn't declare he'd do 50 a day. He told himself, 2 push-ups, right after I brush my teeth. That was it. No gym membership, no elaborate plan. And yet those 2 push-ups became 5. Then 10, then 20. And because it felt natural and easy, it didn't trigger the inner resistance that kills most new habits. In this first spark of change, you learn something freeing. You don't need to wait for motivation to strike. You can start right now, right where you are, with whatever you have. And the beauty of it? Once you take that first small step, the next one feels lighter. This is the spark of small beginnings. A spark you can light today without waiting for the perfect Monday, the right mood, or the New Year's resolution list. By the end of this part, you might already feel it. That shift inside. You're realizing that maybe, just maybe, change doesn't have to be so hard. Maybe you've been standing in your own way, looking for the big leap, when all you really needed was the first, smallest step forward. It's easy to believe that the missing ingredient in your life is motivation. You've heard it countless times. You just need to want it more. Every January, millions of people ride the wave of this thinking, fueled by sheer willpower, ready to conquer their goals. But what happens a few weeks later? The gyms empty out, the diets fade, the journals collect dust. B.J. Fogg calls this out for what it is: a misunderstanding of how human behavior really works. Motivation isn't a steady force you can depend on. It's more like the weather. Some days it's bright and sunny, and you feel unstoppable. Other days it's cloudy and cold, and all you want is to stay under the covers. If your entire plan for change depends on sunny days, you'll give up the moment the weather turns. He tells us to stop treating motivation as the fuel for change, and instead think of it as a bonus. Nice when it's there, but never the engine that drives the journey. This shift is powerful, because it takes away the guilt. You realize that you're not broken because your motivation disappears. You're simply human. Think about the last time you started something new, like a workout routine. At first, you felt excited. You could see the vision, the stronger, healthier version of yourself. But as the days passed, that excitement faded. Life got in the way. Work got busy. You skipped one day, then two. Soon, the habit was gone. That's not because you didn't care enough. It's because you were trying to run on a fuel that naturally runs out. Instead of chasing motivation, Fogg shows you how to design habits that don't need it. This is where the tiny approach shines. When a new behavior is so easy you can do it without thinking. Like one push-up, one breath, one glass of water. You remove the need for that motivational spark altogether. He uses a simple formula. Behavior, naku, motivation, X, ability, X, prompt. If motivation drops, you can still succeed by making the behavior easier or by giving yourself the right prompt. For example, instead of needing to feel inspired to drink water, you could simply place a glass by your coffee maker, so it becomes part of your morning routine without thought. The beauty of this is that it works even when you're tired, stressed, or distracted. On your lowest energy day, you can still do the tiny version of the habit, and doing it keeps the chain alive. Over time, you may even surprise yourself. On a day when your energy spikes, you might do more than you planned, but you'll never punish yourself for doing less. And here's the quiet truth that almost feels like a secret. Small habits done consistently change you far more than big habits done occasionally. It's the steady drip of water that shapes the stone, not the single dramatic crash of a wave. When you stop waiting for motivation, you stop waiting for permission to begin. You realize you can take action any time. Right now, even, without needing to feel ready. That's the freedom that comes from breaking free of motivation's grip. In this moment, you might be thinking about one goal you've been putting off because you're waiting for the right feeling. What would happen if you let go of that waiting? If you stripped that goal down to something so simple you could do it right now, without a burst of energy? That's where the real change starts. In action, not in waiting for the perfect emotional forecast. Imagine walking through your daily routine as if you were tracing the path of a familiar river. You wake up, brush your teeth, make your coffee, check your phone. These moments happen almost without thought, flowing one into the next. Now, imagine dropping a tiny leaf into that river, something small enough that it doesn't disrupt the current, but it becomes part of the flow. That leaf is what B.J. Fogg calls an anchor habit. Anchor habits are powerful because they don't require you to create new time for your change. Instead, they latch onto something you already do, something so ingrained in your life that forgetting it would feel impossible. When you connect a new habit to one of these anchors, the new behavior becomes just as automatic. Fogg's own push-up story is a perfect example. He didn't just decide to do 2 push-ups whenever during the day. He anchored them to brushing his teeth. Every time the toothbrush hit the counter, it became the silent signal to drop and do the push-ups. No debate, no scheduling, just a natural continuation of what was already there. The beauty of anchors is that they bypass one of the biggest obstacles to habit building: memory. We often fail at habits simply because we forget to do them, not because we don't care enough. By using an existing routine as a prompt, you remove that friction entirely. Think about your own life. You pour coffee every morning. Could that be the moment you drink a glass of water? You tie your shoes before heading out? Could that be when you take 3 deep breaths? You switch off your computer at the end of the day. Could that be when you write 1 sentence in your journal? Anchors also carry emotional weight. If your anchor is something you enjoy, the positive feeling flows into your new habit. If you love the smell of fresh coffee, pairing it with a gratitude thought makes that moment even warmer. Over time, the anchor and the habit begin to fuse in your mind. One brings the other automatically. Fogg encourages you to start by looking for what he calls anchor moments. Existing habits that are already solid, frequent, and reliable. These are the sturdy hooks where you can hang something new. And the smaller the new habit, the easier it will stick. There's also a hidden psychological benefit to anchors. They create a sense of rhythm and identity. When you tell yourself, "I'm the kind of person who does this right after that," you're reinforcing a mini story about who you are, and every time you repeat that sequence, you strengthen the identity you want to become. Over time, these little chains of action weave into something bigger, a network of small, automatic behaviors that quietly shape your days. You're no longer struggling to find the time for change. The change lives inside the time you already have. As you walk through your next morning, pay attention. Notice the places where an anchor could live. See the spaces between your automatic actions, the places where a tiny habit could fit like a puzzle piece. This is where transformation hides, not in rewriting your whole schedule, but in planting seeds in the soil you already tend every day. If you've ever tried to force yourself into a new habit, you know how exhausting it can be. The constant self-talk. "Come on, just do it. Don't be lazy, you have to push yourself," can feel like dragging a stubborn mule up a hill. But B.J. Fogg reveals a truth that can change everything. Discipline and willpower are not the magic ingredients for lasting change. Emotions are. Why emotions? Because while logic tells you what you should do, emotions decide what you'll actually repeat. If a habit makes you feel good, your brain tags it as worth doing again. If it feels like punishment, your brain will try to avoid it. We're wired that way. Think about it. When was the last time you kept doing something you truly enjoyed? Maybe it was a hobby, a walk at sunset, or even a particular morning ritual. You didn't have to motivate yourself to keep doing it. You wanted to, because it felt good. Fogg's insight is that we can design that same emotional pull into our habits from the start. And here's the surprising twist. You don't have to wait for your emotions to naturally show up. You can create them. This is where celebration comes in. Each time you do your habit, no matter how small, you mark it with a deliberate burst of positive emotion. You smile, pump your fist, whisper, "Yes," or simply think, "I'm awesome." It might sound silly, but your brain doesn't care if it's small. It notices the feeling. Fogg calls this the shine moment. That instant when you let yourself feel proud and successful, even if it was just flossing 1 tooth. Over time, this tiny emotional charge wires the habit into your brain much faster than discipline ever could. Most of us were taught to save celebration for the big milestones, the graduation, the promotion, the big finish line. But what if the finish line was every single step? What if you gave yourself the gift of pride every time you did something that mattered, even in miniature form? This shift does something powerful. It reframes the habit from being a chore to being a reward in itself. Instead of thinking, "Ugh, I have to do this," you begin to think, "I get to feel good when I do this." And that changes everything. Even when life is stressful, even when you don't have much time, you can still create a pocket of joy in your day by doing something small and celebrating it. It's not about faking happiness. It's about giving your brain a reason to keep coming back to that habit day after day. If willpower is like a gas tank that runs dry, emotions are like solar energy, renewable, free, and available every single day. And the more you tap into them, the brighter and more natural your habits become. So the next time you take that first sip of water, do that one stretch, or write that one sentence, pause. Let yourself smile. Tell yourself you did well. In that moment, you're not just doing a habit, you're teaching your brain to love it. And that's the kind of lesson that sticks for life. We grow up with a vision of success that's cinematic. The triumphant leap, the dramatic transformation, the before and after montage. It's the athlete holding the trophy, the student at the top of the class, the entrepreneur landing the deal. But B.J. Fogg invites us to see success through a different lens. One that's quieter, more personal, and far more sustainable. In his world, success isn't measured by the size of the action, but by the consistency of it. It's not about doing something spectacular once. It's about doing something small over and over until it becomes part of who you are. This is the art of redefining success in tiny steps. Imagine you want to become someone who runs regularly. The traditional approach says you need to hit the track for miles every day, and anything less is failure. But Fogg flips that thinking on its head. Success could simply be lacing up your shoes. Why? Because if you do that often enough, you'll eventually find yourself running. And when you do, it'll be because you're ready, not because you're forcing it. When you define success in small steps, you remove the crushing weight of all or nothing. You no longer have to achieve the entire goal today. You only have to take the next doable step. And because the step is so small, it's easy to win. Every win, no matter how minor, becomes proof to yourself that you can follow through. Fogg calls these moments micro-victories. And they're not just feel-good moments. They're habit fertilizer. Each one strengthens the root system of your behavior, making it more likely to grow and survive even in rough conditions. Over time, the wins pile up, and what started as a sapling of change becomes a sturdy tree. The brilliance here is that you start experiencing the identity of success before you reach the big finish line. You don't have to wait until you've run a marathon to call yourself a runner. You become a runner the moment you act like one, even if it's only for 30 seconds. This shift also changes how you respond to setbacks. When success is measured in tiny steps, a missed day isn't a collapse. It's just a missed step. You can take the next one without shame or guilt, and the habit keeps breathing. There's no catastrophic failure, no need to start over, because the process is built to bend without breaking, and something else happens along the way. The steps begin to grow on their own. You might start by flossing one tooth, but eventually you floss them all. You might start with one push-up and find yourself doing 10 because you feel like it. You didn't force yourself to scale up. It happened naturally, as an expression of who you were becoming. This is how change sneaks up on you. One day you realize you've been living the life you once thought was out of reach, not because you made one massive effort, but because you took small steps so consistently that they carried you there. Redefining success in this way doesn't just make habits easier to build. It makes them harder to lose. And when you live in a world where even the smallest step counts, you're never far from a win. There's a moment in nearly every habit change where you find yourself tangled up in something you didn't plan for. A pattern that keeps pulling you back into old behavior. Maybe it's scrolling on your phone when you meant to be reading. Maybe it's reaching for snacks late at night, even though you promised yourself you'd stop. These are the stubborn knots of habit, and B.J. Fogg shows us how to untangle them gently, without the usual cycle of guilt and self-blame. Most of us try to break bad habits by going to war with them. We declare we'll quit cold turkey, cut ourselves off completely, and punish any slip-ups. But Fogg argues that this approach often fails because it relies on constant willpower and creates a sense of deprivation, which only makes the old habit more tempting. Instead, he offers a more compassionate strategy: replace and reshape. Rather than tearing out the habit like a weed, think of it as redirecting a vine, guiding it to grow somewhere better. The first step is to get curious instead of judgmental. Ask yourself, when do I do this? What triggers it? What am I really getting from it? Often, habits we want to quit are meeting a need: comfort, relief, distraction, even if the habit itself isn't serving us well. Understanding this helps you design a new habit that gives you the same benefit, but in a healthier way. For example, if you snack late at night because you're bored, the solution isn't just stop eating after 8 p.m. That's like cutting off the vine and leaving nothing in its place. Instead, you could anchor a new habit: making a cup of herbal tea, taking a short walk, or journaling for 5 minutes, to the same trigger that used to send you to the kitchen. You're still meeting the need, but now with something that aligns with your goals. Fogg also emphasizes the power of scaling habits down. If your goal is to stop spending hours on social media, you might not need to quit completely at first. You could remove the app from your home screen, so opening it requires more effort. That tiny change in environment slows down the automatic reflex and gives you a moment to choose. The key is kindness toward yourself. Instead of beating yourself up for slipping, treat each repetition of the old habit as a data point, a clue that helps you refine your strategy. Every time you catch yourself, you're learning about the triggers, the timing, and the emotional cues that drive the habit. That knowledge makes it easier to design a replacement that sticks. When you approach unwanted habits this way, they lose their power over you. They're no longer enemies you're fighting, but patterns you're reshaping. And over time, as the new behavior takes root, the old one fades naturally. Not because you forced it out, but because it simply doesn't fit who you're becoming. The truth is, untangling a habit is like untangling a knot in a necklace chain. You can't yank it free without making it worse. You have to work it loose gently, patiently, and with care. And when you do, you're left with something valuable: the freedom to choose what truly belongs as a stage set. The props, the lighting, the layout, all of it silently guides the performance. Without realizing it, the spaces we live and work in are constantly nudging our behavior. B.J. Fogg teaches that if you want to make change easier, you don't just change yourself, you change the stage. This is the art of designing for success, shaping your surroundings so the right habits become almost automatic and the wrong ones fade into the background. It's not about adding more willpower, it's about making the desired action the path of least resistance. Fogg likes to remind us that human behavior is heavily influenced by convenience. If you keep your guitar out of its case and on a stand in the middle of your living room, you'll play it more. If you put a bowl of fresh fruit on the counter instead of chips in the pantry, you'll reach for the fruit without thinking. You're not fighting temptation. You're making your good choice the easiest choice. And the reverse is true. If you want to make a bad habit harder to do, you can increase the friction. Want to watch less TV? Unplug it and put the remote in a drawer. Want to check your phone less? Keep it in another room while you work. Small environmental tweaks like these might seem insignificant, but over time, they can completely shift the rhythm of your day. One of Fogg's most practical tips is to look for hot spots, areas in your life where the environment is either helping or hindering you. If your desk is cluttered with papers, your brain might resist starting a new project. Clearing it off creates a visual cue that says, "This is a space for focus." If your gym bag is packed and by the door, you've already removed one more barrier between you and a workout. Designing for success also means anticipating moments of weakness. If you know that late-night snacking is your challenge, you can stock your fridge with healthier options or keep snacks out of sight altogether. This isn't about denying yourself. It's about creating a default setting that supports your goals. What's remarkable is how quickly these environmental changes begin to work without you thinking about them. You no longer have to wrestle with the decision. It's made for you by the space you've shaped. And because you're not draining your willpower with constant internal battles, you have more energy to focus on what really matters. The truth is, the most successful people don't rely on superhuman discipline. They rely on systems. They create spaces that quietly whisper, "Do this," and remove the cues that say, "Do that instead." Over time, the environment becomes an ally, a silent partner in your growth. Look around your own world right now. What could you bring closer to make it easier? What could you move further away to make it harder? Every change you make to your surroundings is like adjusting the current of a river. Shift it slightly, and over time, it will carry you somewhere completely new. Think of your habits like a garden. Some plants are seedlings, just beginning to sprout. Others are young but sturdy, needing a little water and sunlight. A few may already be strong trees, their roots deep and branches wide. B.J. Fogg urges us to treat our habits with the same patience, attention, and care that a gardener gives to the living things in their soil. The magic of starting small is that it allows you to plant many seeds without overwhelming yourself. You don't have to overhaul your entire life in a week. You can begin with just 1 or 2 tiny habits and let them grow naturally. And, just like in gardening, growth isn't always visible at first. Sometimes, the most important work happens beneath the surface. Fogg teaches that habits grow best when they're nurtured in the right conditions. That means giving them consistent light, which comes in the form of regular practice, and watering them with positive emotion. Every time you celebrate a tiny win, you're feeding the habit, strengthening its roots so it can withstand the inevitable storms of busy schedules, bad moods, and unexpected setbacks. It's also important to protect your young habits from the weeds, competing behaviors that might crowd them out. If you're trying to build a habit of reading before bed, keeping your phone out of reach removes the weed that steals your attention. If you want to walk more, choosing a route that passes through a park instead of a row of tempting cafes makes it easier to stay on track. And here's the beauty. Habits, like plants, often grow in ways that surprise you. A small morning stretch might lead you to try yoga. A nightly gratitude thought might lead you to start a full journal. Just as a single vine can spread to cover an entire wall, a single habit can branch into areas of your life you never expected. Fogg warns against trying to force rapid growth. Pulling on a plant won't make it grow faster. It will only damage it. Likewise, pushing yourself to scale a habit too quickly can break it. Let the increase happen organically, driven by your own readiness and enjoyment, not by pressure. One of the most encouraging parts of this approach is that even if you miss a day, the habit isn't dead. The roots are still there. You can water it again tomorrow, and it will continue growing. The permanence comes not from never missing, but from always returning. When you see your habits as a living garden, you stop expecting instant results and start appreciating the slow, steady process. You find joy in tending to them, knowing that each small act of care is shaping the life you want. So ask yourself, what are you planting today, and how will you protect, nurture, and celebrate it until it grows into something that feels as natural and beautiful as a tree that's been there your whole life? There's a quiet kind of magic in the act of celebration. Not the grand parties or champagne toasts, but the small personal moments when you tell yourself, yes, I did it. B.J. Fogg calls this the snowball effect of celebration, and it might just be the most underestimated tool for building lasting habits. When most people think about habit building, they focus on discipline, repetition, and maybe a bit of self-criticism when they slip. But Fogg flips that completely. The fastest way to wire a habit into your brain is to make it feel good immediately after you do it. Your brain is wired to seek pleasure, and when a behavior is paired with a positive emotion, it starts craving that behavior again. Here's the key. The size of the action doesn't matter. The brain doesn't measure the magnitude of the accomplishment. It measures the emotional charge that follows it. Flossing 1 tooth, drinking 1 glass of water, doing 1 push-up. If you celebrate these moments with genuine joy, you're telling your brain, this is important. Do it again. Fogg encourages people to find a celebration style that feels natural. Some might smile and say, yes. Others might do a little fist pump, hum a victory tune, or simply take a deep breath of pride. The form doesn't matter. What matters is that it sparks a real feeling of success. Over time, this celebration snowballs. Each tiny habit completed and celebrated feeds the next, creating a chain reaction of wins. You're no longer waiting for motivation to strike because the habit itself becomes the reward. That shift changes everything. You go from dragging yourself toward the finish line to being pulled forward by your own enjoyment. And here's something that surprises many people. Celebrating small successes not only helps you build new habits, it also reshapes your self-image. Each time you acknowledge a win, no matter how small, you're reinforcing a story about yourself. I'm the kind of person who follows through. That identity is what ultimately sustains change, even when life gets messy. Think of it like rolling a snowball down a hill. At first, it's tiny, barely noticeable. But with each roll, each small action paired with celebration, it picks up more snow, more momentum. Soon, it's not something you're pushing. It's something that's carrying you forward. This is why Fogg tells his students to over-celebrate in the early stages of a habit. You might feel a little silly at first, but the payoff is huge. By flooding your brain with positive reinforcement, you're making it easier to choose the habit again tomorrow and the day after that, until it becomes second nature. So, the next time you take a step toward your goal, no matter how small, pause. Smile. Let yourself feel that spark of pride. It's not just a feel-good moment. It's the very thing that makes your habits stick. And the more you do it, the bigger that snowball of change becomes. We're often taught that the path to success is paved with perfection, that if you miss a day, slip once, or break the chain, you've failed. But B.J. Fogg dismantles that belief with one of the most freeing truths in his book. Perfection is a myth, and chasing it will kill your progress. The problem with perfectionism is that it creates an all-or-nothing mindset. One missed workout becomes the reason to quit entirely. One unhealthy meal convinces you that the diet is ruined. It's a trap that turns a single stumble into a downward spiral. Fogg invites you to step into a different way of thinking, one that treats habits like living, breathing things. Just as a plant can miss a day of sunlight and still thrive, your habit can miss a day and still grow. What matters is returning to it without shame. He calls this embracing flexibility, and it's a skill as important as the habit itself. When you allow yourself to adapt, you make it possible for your habit to survive the ups and downs of real life. If you can't do your full workout, do a single stretch. If you can't meditate for 10 minutes, take one slow, intentional breath. The habit isn't broken. It's simply scaled to fit the day. This flexibility is what keeps habits alive for years instead of weeks. It frees you from the guilt that so often follows a missed day, replacing it with a calm confidence. I can always begin again. That mindset shift turns every day into an opportunity, not a pass-fail test. Fogg also points out that perfectionism often delays starting in the first place. We tell ourselves we'll begin when conditions are just right, when we have more time, more energy, the perfect plan. But life never lines up perfectly. Waiting for flawless conditions means waiting forever. By letting go of the need to be perfect, you open the door to starting now, even if it's messy. And here's the surprising thing. Embracing imperfection doesn't make you lazier. It makes you more consistent. When you stop expecting yourself to be perfect, you remove the emotional weight that makes habits feel like a burden. You're more willing to show up in small ways, and those small ways add up. Think of it like walking down a path. If you trip, you don't turn around and walk back home. You keep going. The stumble is just part of the journey. The same is true for habits. Missing a step doesn't erase the progress you've made. It's simply part of the rhythm of growth. In the end, letting go of perfection is what allows your habits to fit into a real, imperfect life. It's the reason they'll last not just for a season, but for years, because they can bend without breaking. And when your habits can bend, so can you. At some point in this journey, something shifts. You're no longer just following a set of habits. You're shaping your life with deliberate design. This is where B.J. Fogg invites you to see yourself not just as a person who has habits, but as a habit designer. A habit designer doesn't wait for change to happen. They create it. They look at their days like an architect looks at blueprints, asking, what do I want this space to feel like? What do I want to happen here automatically? How can I make it beautiful, easy, and inevitable? The tools you've gathered so far, starting tiny, anchoring, celebrating, designing your environment, embracing flexibility, all become part of your design kit. Now, you can use them not only to change one or two behaviors, but to intentionally craft an entire lifestyle that reflects your values. Fogg encourages you to start with what matters most to you. Maybe it's health, connection, learning, creativity, or peace. Once you know the core values you want your life to express, you can begin planting habits that make those values visible. If connection is important, you might anchor a quick check-in text to a friend after your morning coffee. If health matters, you might design your kitchen so fresh foods are the easiest option. The beauty of designing habits around values is that they stop feeling like obligations and start feeling like expressions of who you are. You're not forcing yourself to exercise. You're living out your value of vitality. You're not trying to call your parents. You're honoring your value of family. And here's where the design mindset really shines. You become skilled at experimenting. If a habit isn't working, you don't see it as failure. You see it as feedback. You adjust the anchor, change the environment, scale it down, or swap it for something that fits better. Just like a designer tweaks a draft, you refine your habits until they work beautifully in your real life. Fogg also reminds us that habit design is not about cramming more shoulds into your day. It's about clearing space for what truly matters. That sometimes means removing habits that don't serve you. Even if they're not bad habits, they just don't align with the life you want to create. When you step fully into the role of habit designer, you stop feeling like life is something that's happening to you. Instead, it becomes something you're actively shaping. You wake up with a sense of authorship, knowing that each small choice is a brushstroke in the bigger picture of your life. And perhaps most importantly, you realize that design is never done. There's always room to refine, to evolve, to create something even more aligned with who you are becoming. Every day is another opportunity to adjust the blueprint. And every habit you design is another piece of the life you're building. Somewhere along the way, you notice something profound. The habits you've been building aren't just things you do anymore. They've begun to reshape the way you see yourself. This is the deeper transformation B.J. Fogg points to. Every tiny habit is not just an action, but a vote for the person you want to become. At first, you might have started with something as small as flossing one tooth, doing one push-up, or writing one sentence. But, over time, those small acts became more than tasks. They became proof, silent evidence to yourself that you are a person who follows through. That identity shift is the real victory. Fogg teaches that the most powerful habits are the ones that help you be the kind of person you want to be, not just do the things you want to do. When you focus on identity, habits stick because they're no longer foreign. They're part of your self-story. You're not trying to be healthy. You are someone who values health. You're not forcing yourself to be organized. You are an organized person. And here's the beauty. You don't have to wait years to claim that identity. Every time you perform the habit, no matter how small, you're living it. If you write one sentence, you're a writer that day. If you take one mindful breath, you're a meditator that day. The repetition reinforces the story until it feels natural. This is also where the journey becomes self-sustaining. Instead of dragging yourself forward with motivation, you're pulled forward by alignment. You want to keep acting in ways that match who you believe you are, and because you've built that identity through small, consistent wins, it feels real. Fogg encourages you to reflect on the identities you've already begun to grow through your habits. Who have you become since you started? Which parts of your life feel lighter, more natural, more you than before? Sometimes the changes are so gradual, you don't notice them until someone else points them out. The friend who says you seem calmer, the coworker who notices your energy, the family member who sees your consistency. And perhaps the most empowering realization of all is this: if you can become the kind of person who builds one habit, you can become the kind of person who builds any habit. You've proven to yourself that transformation is possible, not by overhauling your life overnight, but by placing one small stone at a time until you've built an entirely new foundation. In the end, tiny habits isn't just about the habits themselves. It's about the person you grow into as you nurture them. A person who starts small, celebrates the journey, adapts with grace, and lives in alignment with their deepest values. A person who knows that big change is nothing more than a series of tiny, intentional steps. Steps that you can start taking today. Start taking today. Start taking today. Start taking today. Start taking today.